What's up guys, my name is Dimitri and today we're going to take a look at 4 cameras around 600 bucks to get you started into filmmaking. Let's get started. Before we begin, this is not an intensive review of these cameras. There's 4 benchmarks that we wanted to hit with these cameras and all of them pretty much hit almost all of those benchmarks, but it's not an intensive review. Some of these features you may not even want or need, but this is just to help assist you to make an educated decision on your purchase. So there's 4 benchmarks that we wanted these cameras to actually hit. Number 1, 4K at 24 frames per second. Number 2, 60 frames per second full HD. Number 3, articulating screen. Number 4, ease of upgrade. Number 1, 4K at 24 frames per second gives you the ability to future-proof your work because as a society, we are not fully 4K just yet. It also gives you the ability to get more detail, more information. It also allows you to crop in on the image because it's 4K. It's 4 times what regular HD is. Number 2, 60 frames per second for slow motion. This is just another tool that you can use in your filmmaking to slow things down, to tell a better story or add some type of effect to what you are trying to convey to your audience. Number 3, articulating screen. This is not very necessary, but I'm telling you, when you're out there on the field, it may help you when you have an articulated screen where you can flip that monitor up, down, to the side and see different angles. It'll just allow you to get better shots and view those shots on your display. Number 4, ease of upgrade. I wanted these cameras to flow into their bigger brother. So a lot of these cameras have the same menu systems. They look very similar to their bigger brothers. And so that is another reason that these particular cameras were chosen for this list. So the first camera on the list is going to be the A60-100, coming in at 599 bucks. This camera pretty much hits every benchmark. It shoots 4K at 24 frames per second. It shoots 60 and 120 frames per second for slow motion. And it has the same type of menu system as its bigger brother, the A7 series. So this camera pretty much does everything that you need it to do. It also has a 4K signal that is downsampled from 6K to give you better 4K quality. And there is no crop when you go in 4K. If there is, it's a slight crop, but it's not as much as any other camera on this list. Now, there are some downsides. So the cons of the A60-100 are no in-body stabilization. So you may have to put this camera on a gimbal to get those smooth, silky shots where there's not a bunch of camera shake. Number 2 is that it comes in at 599 bucks. So if your budget is 600 bucks, you are only getting a camera and not a lens as well. So you'll have to invest in a lens on top of the camera itself. Coming in at number 2 is going to be the Canon M50 at $579, or you can get it for $599 and it will include a kit lens. Now the Canon M50 actually hits every one of the check marks on our benchmark list. It shoots 4K at 24 frames per second, 60 frames per second, full HD, and has an articulated screen, and it's a part of the Canon line, so it kind of has the same menu systems as its bigger brothers. Now, there are some cons for the M50. Number 1 is going to be that battery life. It has a small battery and it has about 60 to 85 minutes to shoot on. So that's kind of common for almost any of the cameras on this list. You'll have to purchase some extra batteries or keep a charger nearby. Number 2 is going to be that when you go into 4K, this camera crops in to about 2.54. That means any lens you put on it, it's going to times it by 2.54. And so if you have a 50 mil lens, you're going to look at like 120 something millimeter. Number 3 on the list is going to be the SL3 or the 250D by Canon, coming in at around $499.99 or $549.99 or $599.99. There's so many different prices for this particular camera because there's different versions. It's an SL3 or a 250D, and I think the 250D was released maybe in a different country, which is why there's so many different prices available for this actual camera. So you're looking at around $499.99 is what I found it for, and then you'll have to purchase a lens, which will probably push you up to that $600 mark. The Canon SL3 has some great pros to this camera. It shoots 4K at 24 frames per second, 60 frames per second in HD. You also get in-body stabilization, Canon's dual pixel autofocus, as well as an articulated screen. However, there are some cons. This camera has a crop factor as well. When you go into 4K, you're looking at 2.54, I believe, but I'll put it on the screen here. So it crops in on any lens just like the Canon M50. There also is no HD at 24 frames per second. So that's kind of a con, because if you're shooting in 4K all the time, you're using more battery life and you're using more footage, so more memory, more space. All right guys, coming at the end of this list is the Panasonic G7 coming in at $497, or you can get two lenses for $597 including the body. That's the best deal I could find on anything on this list. Now the pros of the G7 is it can shoot in 4K at 24 frames per second. It has 60 frames per second in HD. You have an articulated screen, and it shares a menu system kind of the G5 and above. So there are some cons with the Panasonic G7. It doesn't have the best autofocus. It also kind of falls short in the megapixel range, and coming in at 16 megapixels when all the other cameras have 24 megapixels. This camera also has the smallest sensor. It has a micro 4/3 sensor, which means that it will get a little bit of less depth of field. However, it is probably the best budget camera that I could find. You get two lenses, or you can buy the body and find a micro 4/3 lens out there for $50-$75, and you still will come in under your $600 mark. All right guys, that's our list today, and that's 4 cameras that all kind of hit those benchmarks. However, those benchmarks are just put in place to assist you and help you while you grow. You can find any camera that shoots 24 frames per second and use it and try to make a film with it. All right guys, that is all. That's 4 cameras coming in around $600. If you guys know any cameras that can meet or exceed any of the benchmarks that I have in place, please comment them below so you can help out your fellow filmmakers. Guys, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.